Hi, everybody. It's Joe Chaffee, and guess who's here today? We've got the star cat, Kovu. It's Kovu. He heard I was going to do a tape this afternoon, so he wanted to hang out. And he's also excited about the blocking pattern. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or should I say our YouTube channel. Glad you're here. To my returning viewers, hope you're having a great weekend. Hope you recovered from the severe weather yesterday if you're in the Northeast. And if you are new, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. The little subscribe button is over on the side of the page there. And when you click that, you'll get notifications every time new weather videos go up, which is at least once a day. So what do you think? Should we talk about what the weather pattern is going forward? He's just the sweetest little boy. Okay, so I'm actually quite fascinated and excited about what I'm seeing in terms of the overall blocking signature that is developing across all the models. Models are doing it of varying strengths, and it's going to ultimately be the strength of the block that determines what winds up happening. So let's first take a look at the GFS model run today, which brings in a system into the Pacific Northwest. Of course, everything's quiet now here in the East after yesterday's debacle. What an incredible, almost unprecedented amount of severe weather that we had yesterday. But I was told that I didn't get a chance to look back, but apparently last year at this time we had something similar. So I guess it has happened before. But anyhow, we have a system on the GFS that's coming into the Pacific Northwest, and that's going to make its way into the Rockies, and a piece of it actually is going to come out into Minnesota. You see it here. So we're starting the warm front, cold front process again as we move into the middle part of this week. So that's going to mean for rain, and it might even mean for another round of severe weather at some point somewhere. We have this sort of snaking warm front here in the eastern part of the United States. You can see where the snow is. It's all up to the north of the low, which makes sense because there really isn't any cold air to speak of at the moment. And that low heads on a track similar to the one we saw yesterday, and there's going to be a trailing cold front. So now, we're into Wednesday, March 1st here, and that looks to be like it's going to be another very warm day with west-southwest winds, and depending on how much shower activity is around, will determine how high temperatures get, but I wouldn't be surprised to see certainly 60s and maybe even some 70-degree readings are not impossible again. As this front nears, I'm thinking that there'll probably be some kind of severe weather episode along the front on Wednesday in parts of the Ohio Valley. Now, whether that winds up being the case as we move to the east, there might not be as much energy with this as what we saw yesterday. You notice the tilt of the front here is more northeast-southwest as opposed to north-south like yesterday. So the trough is tilted differently. When we look at the upper air, you'll see that, and that will might mitigate the amount of severe weather that will occur ahead of it somewhat. But the risk is still going to probably be there for some places, maybe in the mid-Atlantic states, less so for areas, for southern areas of the Northeast. Now, that front moves on through, and right behind it, you can see that there's some kind of energy that's coming down. There is colder air. There is some genuine colder air behind this next system as it intensifies fairly impressively in eastern Canada. So it pulls down some cold air, and this energy that comes down looks like a weak clipper system that brings a period of light precipitation here. Could be snow Thursday night into Friday morning. And again, it would be light if it happens, and it will fall at night. So if it is light, it may wind up sticking. The warm ground theorists, I'm sure, will be up, jumping up and down. So will the sun angle people who fail to realize that the sun angle doesn't work when it snows at night. But, far be it from me. But anyway, that clipper goes out, and then we have, a cold shot for next weekend. But the GFS is already trying to line up. There's a lot of energy that keeps coming into the Northwest, but it's the northern areas of Northwest. We're talking about Oregon, Washington. This does not extend down into California, and some of that comes east. Now, here's where we have to see if this is reality or not, because the GFS today, now we're into day 8, which is Monday, March 6th. It develops a very strong low going into the western Great Lakes and then moves across the lakes. And again, on this model run, another warm front, cold front combination for early next week. And you can probably have severe weather that's going to occur ahead of that. And it actually has a pretty big snowstorm for the upper Midwest. But I always have suspicions with deep lows being forecasted by the models to go to the lakes because we haven't really seen that many of them. And then this one passes on through, and behind that, there's a very deep trough here in the east. So you get a pretty genuine shot of cold air going into March 8th, 9th. Another clipper coming down from the north on the GFS around day 11, which is March 10th. And by the way, if I don't mention the date, if you look on the Tropical Tidbits map, you can see more maps and all different kinds of models, by the way, at tropicaltidbits.com. It's a great site. And I give Levi Cowan, who runs that site, a ton of credit because he just does a fantastic job. You ever want to know what the time is or date, in case I fail to mention it on the map, it's right up here. This is tells you what model we're looking at, GFS, the time of the run, which is in Greenwich time. So 12Z is the 7 a.m. Data that goes in there, the date, today's date, the forecast hour 276, which is out there, and the date that it's valid for. So this would be for 7 p.m. Thursday, 0Z Friday, because it's Greenwich time, so it's 5 hours ahead. So this is 7 p.m. Thursday, March 9th. All right. That this is what the surface is supposed to look like. So another cold front coming through the east, and then it has another diver behind it, which it wants to make for cold and snow in the northeast, and then that low moves offshore and intensifies, and then it has yet another diver behind that. What the GFS is implying, as I've been saying many times with these models, what the GFS is implying here strongly is that we're going to have a blocking pattern. I don't think there's any doubt that that's going to be the case. We are going to see the North Atlantic Oscillation, which measures the magnitude of blocking, go negative. In some models, they're making it go strongly negative. And that is going to ultimately determine just exactly what we're dealing with here. Now, focus your attention on over Greenland. And I'm going to roll this back on the GFS model. Then we're going to look at the Canadian, which is a bit different because it's important in these blocking situations to take a look at how models handle it, because blocking patterns can be very unstable. So blocks can become much stronger than what models forecast or much weaker, and there's a lot of volatility in that. And for those of you who might ask the logical question is, well, what is a block? All right, I'm going to rotate this around. Now, first off, we are at the present time. Now, right along 40 degrees west up into Greenland, we have building high pressure there, okay? And then that high closes off, okay? So you have a completely closed off high over Greenland. And what it does is it sits there. So remember, I've been repeating the analogy of the gears in a box. You know, the gears in a baby's toy. He puts the gears in, and then you turn one, and all the wheels turn. Well, same principle here, except for the fact that the gears are constantly changing in size and scope and in location, and they're moving around. So once one of them does that, the other ones respond. Now, in this particular instance, we have one gear that's decided not to move, and that's that upper high. And you see it here as I move it through time. We'll go back just a little bit here. So here we are, March 1st, 2nd, 3rd. That upper high, March 4th, 3 days, it's still there. That gear is holding in place. So what happens is these systems here, instead of wanting to follow their natural progression of moving west to east, have to go underneath it. So you get all this energy now gets forced underneath the block. You see how it just kind of gets shoved out to the south and east, and that's that upper high holding. And what the GFS does is holds that upper high. We're now into March 6th. Starts to weaken it somewhat, but then there's another ridge that's coming up along 60 up in eastern Canada, and it gets reinforced, rebuilds again around March 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th. So you've got this big block here to the north. So that displaces cold air further south over time. So what we have, and now we're looking, I'm just going to take March 10th here as a point to illustrate. Weather disturbance dropping south, the upper flow out of Canada rather than instead of coming straight across, the upper flow from Canada. And here's that big blocking high. So it displaces everything much further south than it otherwise would be. So this creates the alleyway for cold air. The question is whether there's room in any of this with these disturbances diving down for some kind of trough to sharpen up in the east. And again, late in the period, this is going to change from run to run. And on this particular run, it does show quite a bit of energy rotating around here in the east as we move into the middle part of March. So the strength and magnitude of this blocking signature is very important. But I want to show you something from just 12 hours ago. This was the run from last night, okay? For the same time frame of March 13th, 7 a.m., March 13th, this model run winds up breaking the block down and creating another trough in the west, which would warm things up in the east. The polar flow is completely cut off. That was the model run from last night, and we've seen some occasional model runs do this. But then when we went to the mid-cycle run for the same time frame, now the block is stronger, and the trough is in the east and not in the west. Instead of a trough there, you've got a strong ridge. And then we have today's, which is here for, again, this is for Thursday night, March 12th, or 0Z, March 13th. We have a really strong blocking signature on this particular run. So this is where we're at going forward. Is the big determinant in all of this is going to be how strong does this blocking high get, because that ultimately is going to drive everything going forward as we move through the next couple of weeks. Now, I want to go to the Canadian today, because the Canadian model, and I know I joke around about the Canadian model, probably hasn't gotten anything really right since the Treaty of Westphalia. But we're going to look at the Canadian model, and I want to show you the surface differences with the GFS going forward, because there are two distinct differences here. And let's look at this. First off, it seems to be somewhat lined up with the idea of this system for Wednesday, although it's not nearly as intense as the GFS is. So it does have this sort of warm front, cold front combination, but it's not anything that's overly impressive in my view. What it does not have is that, it kind of does. It's just very, very weak with this clipper system that's behind it that moves through Thursday night into Friday. So it doesn't show anything happening. And then with this next system where it's telegraphed to make a big storm in the Great Lakes, it's not, it really doesn't do very much. It's got a low that moves across the northern lakes, big deal, with a cold front that comes through here, but it's nothing like the GFS. So here's the Canadian for next weekend, and here's the GFS. Okay, well, the GFS follows that up now with the big storm for early next week. Okay, so we'll go back to the Canadian, and you can see here that it really doesn't do very much with that. It just kind of takes this lead system out and then intensifies it as it moves east. It does bring down the cold air behind it, which makes sense. But the GFS has some other system that it seems to be eyeing on coming into the northwest, that it makes a big storm early next week in the western Great Lakes. So again, I'm skeptical about all this. We can look back at the European from last night to see if the European did anything, and actually the European really didn't have that big storm in the Great Lakes. It has a much weaker system that it wants to take to the east. Let me just set this back up. So this is Friday. You can kind of pick out there's just some kind of disturbance here that's in the flow for Thursday night into Friday morning. And the European, I think, was a little bit further south than the GFS was. Then it gets cold, and then you've got lower pressures here in the plains early Monday that it brings into western New York. But again, not nothing like the GFS does, where it wants to overdevelop the trough here in the west. And then eventually the European does make a a fairly impressive storm in the Gulf of Maine, so that it brings down another shot of cold air for the middle of next week. But the Europeans' blocking signature, which we'll look at here, I'll put the upper air and we'll flip it back. Now, this is last night's European. We don't have the day run European. Doesn't start until early afternoon, so we're not going to have it for this video. But you know, the signature of the blocking high builds in the same way. So here it is on Wednesday, March 1st, and you can see that high just kind of, it morphs out a little differently, but it still has higher than normal pressures up in Greenland and in northeastern Canada. So that does force the trough, although not quite as deep as the GFS does. So we'll show you by comparison here. So there's the GFS. The GFS has a much deeper trough because of what it's doing with that Midwestern system. So I think, you know, what we're going to need to do and figure out going forward in resolving all this is focusing on this developing North Atlantic oscillation, this developing blocking high to the north, and what it's going to mean in the long term. The strength of that block ultimately is going to determine everything else to its west and south. And it's in blocking patterns that sometimes if you get a strong enough system to get involved here in the flow, that you wind up creating a deep trough in the eastern part of the United States underneath all that blocking. That's how sometimes we can get some fairly impressive storms here in the eastern part of the United States. I don't know that that's going to happen. There are other things that need to occur, including a ridge in the west, which is kind of there, but it's not a ridge that flies all the way up, because, you know, as you want a strong ridge in the west, it compensates the weight for the deep trough in the east. So he's kind of counterbalancing one and the other. And if you've got a very strong ridge in the west, that would argue for a deep, sharp trough in the east and create the possibility of a bigger storm. I don't see anything. I mean, I can sort of visualize possibilities in all this, of course, given the structure of the upper air. But there's nothing that I could specifically point to and say, okay, this system is one we're going to have to watch as it comes down. I don't think we're there yet in terms of how we're going to approach the forecast. I think we can say, by the way, that we're going to have a very active, exciting, and interesting weather time over the next couple of weeks. March is almost always a month of a lot of volatility, where you can be 70 degrees one day and have snow the next. They saw it in Vermont and New Hampshire with this system from yesterday. There was thunder snow going on in northern New England last night through all of this. So it was quite an amazing day indeed. So I would just say, for those of you who want the spring to come and springtime weather, I think you're going to have some of that, but I wouldn't necessarily get used to it being consistent. For those of you who still want to see some wintertime weather, I would say you have a pattern that could support that happening, but it's going to be inside the context of a lot of volatility, and that, I think, is going to be the signature over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be doing this from day to day, and we're going to come every day. I think we're going to be seeing something radically different from the day before. So just enjoy the ride. It's a lot of fun, you know. And by the way, once we get out of the winter season, let me just tell you what I'm planning to do is, when I have some time as we go through the spring, I will be cutting some weather videos specifically designed to teach rather than forecast, where, you know, we can talk about warm fronts and cold fronts and what they are and how they, you know, what their characteristics are, how they behave, et cetera, jet stream patterns, and, you know, what they are, what it all means, how does everything evolve, you know, some kind of like a primer, so that when you're looking at these videos, you're not completely lost. I try not to be too technical, but you know, and I know some of you are sort of playing catch up. What I hope is, as you watch these videos, even though you may not understand everything, after a while things may start to make sense, and at those points you get those little light bulb moments that go off, and you're able to say, oh, now I understand why this is doing what it's doing. And then meteorological knowledge will continue to expand. And, a day may come where you can actually look at a map and say, whoa, this is something like what we saw 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. And I think this is going to be the outcome, or this is a possibility. I will be doing that in the spring. When we get into springtime weather, at least I don't have to be dealing with winter storms and trying to figure out and trying to find them. All right, so everybody have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope if you're in parts of Pennsylvania that are going to be out without power for about 4 or 5 days with all the severe weather that happened yesterday there, and parts of western New Jersey, also getting some severe weather, the Hudson Valley, down into parts of Virginia. I mean, it was just an absolutely wicked day. I hope you came through it all okay, and that you can spend at least today recovering, the weather a lot calmer here in the eastern part of the United States. What latest website posts on meteorologistjoechaffee.com. Angry Ben has the outlook for New York City. He has a long-range post up at nycweathernow.com. He is my Joe Stradamus partner. He covers New York City, and I cover the broader context in Long Island. Long Island is on weatherlongisland.com, and you can download my app and subscribe to my forecasts. The app link will come up here at the top of the video. It's for New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, and the Hudson Valley, and eastern Pennsylvania. Each is zone specific. You don't get icons, you get me, my opinions, my forecasts, and not some computer generated forecasts, all for $1 a month. So if you can part with $1, go by all means, but please don't feel obligated to do that. And Kovu has come back after a brief stint away. I know a lot of you have been asking about him, and he really appreciates it. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your Sunday, and we will talk to you tomorrow.